we're at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number one overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number one overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was Lincoln! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
I do sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Jennings Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I think the Washington Commanders are one of the best bets to win it all, or at the very least win the NFC.
Their offensive line, I do want to say one thing. It's very average. The coaching is good. They're getting good coaching from Bobby Johnson, their line coach. Here from the Giants, but they've kind of overachieved. Let's call it like it is. Daniels has taken them up. Look, that division's not very good, and they could very well win it over the Eagles, and the Cowboys. They're not a Super Bowl team.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
The Philadelphia Eagles emerge out of a bye with a win, so you want to make sure that you are here to start hour number 2 for Donnie Right-Side's assessment on maybe the least celebrated win in Week 6 around the National Football League. We welcome you to hour 2. It's a Monday live right here on the early line. We round out the Sunday slate all around the National Football League. We look back on the weekend and what a great one it was on a Saturday in college football. We've got the LCSs underway in MLB. Last night at the Ravine in L.A., the Dodgers dominate in game number 1 against the New York Mets. Back in New York, it's number 1 tonight of the ALCS up in Yankee Stadium, elsewhere in the greater New York area, but across the Hudson in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Maybe the biggest Week 6 Monday Night Football game in the last decade of the National Football League between the Jets and the Bills. What a second hour. What a Monday, DRS, we have in store.
It is. I mean, you got afternoon baseball. You got one of the biggest football games of the season. You might be saying, like, well, they're not really two great football teams here, but boy, the stakes are so high for Aaron Rodgers and that New York media tonight. I can't wait to see it get after way. But we are having some fun times here. Monday morning quarterback to get after it, have some fun, analyze these games and how you push it forward. Love Mondays. Let's get after it because the hot topics, they are going to continue to fly here.
DRS, can I convince you to potentially work tomorrow on a Tuesday on the early line or maybe call in to hour 2, hour 3? I feel like we're going to need your take after what is going to be a scintillating Monday Night Football game with the scorching reactions afterward.
Can we, maybe a phoner? Like, do I have to appear on camera? Can we just like put like a glamour shot of me up on the screen so I can absolutely let it rip to see what happens? Because the best part about tonight, Ben, the hot takes are going to be both ways. Yes, Aaron Rodgers got his way. He was right. Robert Saleh's a terrible coach. Or if they lose, Aaron Rodgers, are we looking for trade partners right now? It's going to be great.
I'm going to get that shovel ready to bury that guy if they lose tonight on a Monday in MetLife. The only thing I would ask, though, I think we have to update the headshot. That was before fasting, DRS. That was dinner, Donnie, as I like to call him. Got to make sure that we're up to date with how we're looking svelte.
True. I got to get out there. We need some glamour shots. Where's EJ at? Send him over to my house today. Let's get this done.
I'll get in touch with the good people. All right, let's look back and we finish out the Sunday slate. Again, Donnie, the Eagles emerge out of a bye, healthy, looked okay at times. Jalen Hurts, 264, 2 touchdowns, each touchdown toss to the healthy wide receivers. A.J. Brown, who had a $116 in the score. Devontae Smith, 64 receiving yards, big play, and a touchdown. And yet, the Birds do not dominate a bad Browns team. Deshaun Watson throws for less than 200 yards, only a $168, was sacked 5 times again, and they win by 4, do not cover as an 8.5-point home favorite. And speaking of the home crowd, who booed at times as the offense was looking stale, as the game was closing out, Nick Sirianni goes into the stands, not quite into the stands, but looks at the stands from the sideline and pretty much gets into it with the Eagles' home crowd. Donnie, what is happening in Philadelphia?
Look, it's simple. You understand what the Philadelphia, crowd is all about. It's instant gratification and instant disrespect at the same time. But you live with that because you can fumble the football and they could boo you off the field. And the minute you take the football 67 yards for a touchdown, you are back in their good graces here. And for some reason, the head coach doesn't actually understand that. When you simply can take the podium and say, I love this crowd. Like, we know we're not playing good football. They let us know. But the minute we turn the tide here, they're right back behind us here, giving us that push into a victory. They don't know how to do that here. But let's focus on what the Eagles did good yesterday. Jalen Hurts, 16 of 25, 264, 2 touchdowns. Whoa! No interceptions and no turnovers here. You returned your 2 starting wide receivers, which combined for roughly 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, and you got a victory here. That's usually all you can ask for. The defense didn't give up a touchdown here. Fantastic. But you still come away from this football game. The Eagles came off of a bye, Ben. They've now played 5 games. One of the most high-octane front-running offenses over the past couple years hasn't scored a single point in the first quarter all season long. That's the issues that you're running into right now. They just can't figure it out. You should have had an explosive game plan. And now the downfall of it, Jordan Mailata carted off, not with a knee injury, but a hamstring injury. I'm here to tell you, he's not going to be day-to-day. He might be month-to-month if he couldn't walk off the field. And, Dallas Goedert, star tight end here. He goes down with a hamstring injury. I'm here to tell you right now, he's not going to be day-to-day, no matter what the Philadelphia Eagles say. He will be missing weeks of football action. Darius Slay left the game yesterday with a knee injury. So even though they won, they really took it on the chin coming after a bye, saying we have to get healthy, and then somehow end up getting even more injured heading into the next couple weeks schedule. So the sky isn't falling at 3-2, but you can just watch the Philadelphia Eagles and say, they're not on that upper pantheon of the NFC. Yes, they might win 9 to 10 games at this point right now. They're too talented not to do this, but this is not a well-oiled machine that you expected with a layup football game against a dead and buried Browns team on their 3rd straight road game, and the Eagles coming off a bye, and you end at 20-16, where you needed to get 2 first downs at the end of the football game just not to give the Cleveland Browns the ball back.
I think that's the right assessment for Philadelphia. They're going to win games. They have a winning record. But in terms of the overall assessment, it's not overly optimistic for postseason success. But did you notice who got the start yesterday in that nickel cornerback spot?
Oh, he was good. Oh,
hey,
he was
boy.
good. Sacks.
Oh,
I thought I was watching Ronnie Lott out there, man.
Cooper to Gene. No, not Ronnie Lott. Other type of – anyway, we'll keep going around the NFL. Deshaun Watson sacked 5 times yesterday. Deshaun Watson was. Make that 31 now. 31 sacks. No other team has allowed more than 24 sacks this year. The Browns are bad. They have lost 4 straight. They are 1-5. Yesterday, the first cover, though, in a loss this season. Big win for the Falcons yesterday. Sure, they beat Carolina by 18. Whoop-de-doo. But they cover as a 6.5-point road favorite in Charlotte. Atlanta now 3-0 in the NFC South this year, DRS. Total goes way over yesterday of 46.5. Just know it. Carolina, in all 4 starts that Andy Dalton has made, we have hit the over.
By the way, 225 and a touchdown for Kirk Cousins. He scored 38 points wide. Man, sometimes just lean on that ground game. Bijan Robinson, 15 for 95, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Tyler Algier, 18 for 105 and a touchdown. Sometimes the running game is your best friend here. An easy walk-away victory here for the Atlanta Falcons. Now sit at 4-2. The Carolina Panthers, I saw Dan Orlovsky's tweet yesterday, and sometimes I don't agree with him, but he is right here. What are we doing in Carolina? Why is Dalton starting in a 1-5 football team? Goodness.
Yeah. It's time to get Bryce Young back out there. There is no reason for it not to be the case. Carolina is 1-5 straight up and against the spread this year, an underdog in all 6. They have been a dog in every single game since the start of last season. They are now 5-16-2 against the spread. It is abysmal. The Chargers back off the bye. A scary moment for Jim Harbaugh, but he was back on the sideline dealing with some heart issues yesterday. The Chargers run it well, throw it well in Mile High. They snap a 3-game win streak for Denver, 23-16 the win. LA covers as a 3-point road favorite. Total of 35.5 does trickle over. The Colts go into Tennessee and beat the Titans. Will Levis, 95 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. Joe Flacco, clean and efficient. 2 wide receivers, Donnie, for Indy. We didn't expect to be in the game. Both got a touchdown, and Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. Tennessee is abysmal. Will Levis stinks. Joe Flacco's as good of an experienced backup as you could want. Indianapolis, 5-1 ATS this year. And Donnie, all 6 games where the spread has been a 1.5 or 3.5. In between those numbers, they went outright as the slight underdog in Nashville.
I mean, I don't know what they're going to do to Will Levis, but Calvin Ridley's post-game press conference and having no catches but 8 targets, realizing you got to get me involved early in this game. I don't know what's going on in Tennessee, but I love Shane Steichen's offense in Indy. It doesn't matter what your quarterback is or where you are. That's a competent coaching staff, and it's paying off.
From week 6 in the NFL to week 7 in college football. Next.
We're at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number 1 overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number 1 overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of the week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoff.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I think the Washington Commanders are one of the best bets to win it all, or at the very least win the NFC.
Their offensive line, I do want to say one thing. It's very average. The coaching is good. They're getting good coaching from Bobby Johnson, their line coach, here from the Giants. But they've kind of overachieved. Let's call it like it is. Daniels has taken them up. Look, that division's not very good, and they could very well win it over the Eagles and the Cowboys. They're not a Super Bowl team.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
This 2024 college football season Man, it just feels like it's on another level. Sweeping changes to the climate and the landscape entering this year, but the actual games each and every week and each and every Saturday have been delivering. That includes in the Big Ten on Saturday night inside Autzen Stadium. 2 versus 3. Ohio State and Oregon. Game of the Year 2, the designation, after Game of the Year 1 in Tuscaloosa. Another top 5 tilt between Alabama and Georgia exceeded our wildest expectations. So too did Saturday, down to the closing seconds in Eugene. Oregon wins outright as a field goal underdog at home, 32-31 over Ohio State. Both quarterbacks were sensational when you look at the box score, but one very costly mistake from Will Howard in the final 6 seconds, taking off to run, sliding as time expired inside Autzen Stadium. Oregon picks up a monumental win in a Big Ten battle against the Buckeyes, 32-31.
And by the way, 660, 670 total yards passing between these two quarterbacks here, 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. It was a really clean game. The interesting thing for me as it broke down was I thought Ohio State would win this game. I did. I thought they were the more talented team, but not necessarily because we didn't think Oregon had a good offense. It was just how good that Ohio State defense seems to be. And they got shredded yesterday. And sometimes it is about competition and who you played, how you can build up those statistics. But it wasn't like we were questioning Ohio State's defense coming into the season, like, hey, maybe these young kids can get it together. Like, no, we expected dominance right out of the gate. I was really impressed by Oregon for continuing to fire away. And Gabriel just made play after play to get them back into it. They ran for 5 yards per carry and also had 2 rushing touchdowns. I was impressed. But yes, Will Howard at the end of the game, know the time, know the clock, know the distance. You even had a timeout at that point where you could have easily called a quarterback sneak or quarterback draw, ran 10 yards, slid down, called that timeout for a legitimate chance, or just keep it simple. The 5-yard out route just to get you a little bit closer. He did the unthinkable because everybody in the stadium knew the time, and it felt like Will Howard just didn't have that clock in his head and continued to ran all the way down. You might as well just try to run into the end zone at that point because he slides down with no time on the clock, sort of grabs his head, and away you go. And looks like one of the reporters or maybe the camera guys was giving him a little bit of the business here. He wasn't happy with after that, but that was a tough game overall. But again, the takeaways are awesome game. Let's see the rematch. Awesome. Both of these teams can still make it into the college football playoff, which is exactly what we wanted. You got an unbelievable football game on a Saturday night with the chance for a rematch for Ohio State to get revenge and get into the playoff. And also, you know what that means? If Oregon does run the table themselves and finds himself in the Big Ten championship game and loses that game, hey, Oregon, it's all good. You're still going to the college football playoff. I love this season, Ben.
I'm glad that you do, DRS. I'm very glad that you do. Both of these teams, Ohio State and Oregon, entered Week 7 and this second Saturday in October as 8-1 minus money favorites or better to reach the college football playoff. The Buckeyes number minus 1,000 still, Oregon at minus 2,000. Now, co-favorites to win the Big Ten title this year at plus 145. Ohio State was a slight minus money favorite entering Saturday. And Donnie, it is a shame that Will Howard made the boneheaded mistake not recognizing the clock at the end because he was great. 28 of 35, 326 through the air, 2 touchdowns, Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith, both on the receiving end of those scores. Also found the end zone for a 5th consecutive game utilizing his legs. And here's where I'll give credit to the Ducks. They actually stifled, by relative terms, an Ohio State rushing offense that was one of the best in the country, averaging better than 220 on the ground in their opening 5 games, only 4.3 yards per carry. Meanwhile, Oregon ran it, as did Jordan James, who has had at least 80 rushing yards in all 6 now for Oregon for $115 and a score. Dylan Gabriel, 341, 2 touchdowns, a rushing score as well. Evan Stewart, the Texas A&M transfer, a breakout game in a great game on Saturday night inside Autzen Stadium. How would Alabama respond, Donnie? One of the main questions of the early window on Saturday. There have been some questions about Kalen DeBoer. Naturally, we are going to get those early season comparisons to Nick Saban. Oh, no doubt. Nick Saban in his time would have had the Crimson Tide ticked off and ready to respond after losing to Vanderbilt, something, of course, they never did with Nick Saban as their head coach. So Kalen DeBoer better have the boys ready to play at home inside Bryant-Denny against South Carolina on Saturday. Alabama does win. They get a victory over South Carolina, as you can see, 27-25. But as a 3-touchdown home favorite, it was close. South Carolina scoring a touchdown, finding Nick Harbor in the end zone. Lenora Sellers late in the final few minutes. Do not convert the 2-point conversion, but get the onside kick. It did not work at the end, and Alabama survives after a long missed field goal attempt from the Gamecocks, but they do not cover as a 21.5-point home favorite.
By the way, how about the way the game ended, too? You have the interception around that 2 or 3 yard line, run into the end zone, and ready to take a knee, which would have been interesting, the call that they would have made on the field, whether or not the actual momentum carried him into the end zone, which I didn't think it did. If that would have tied the game up, that would have been absolutely incredible theater. You can say, look, the SEC, any win in the SEC is a good one here, but it just feels like the Alabama Crimson Tide right now are teetering on that edge. They got that huge victory, which they almost saw that disappear against Georgia. They pulled that game out. They no-showed at Vanderbilt and almost came home and no-showed against the South Carolina Gamecocks. Decent team, but let's be real. They're 3-3 on the season and dropping to 1-3 in conference play. You weren't favored by 5.5 points and won by 2. You were supposed to have a walk-away easy victory, and we're not seeing it right now from Alabama. Teetering on the edge of, are we the best team in the SEC, or are we actually even going to make the college football playoff?
Yeah, Jalen Milroe, multiple interceptions and yet multiple rushing scores. Alabama's got a huge third Saturday in October ahead against Tennessee. The Volunteers also bouncing back as well on Saturday night. We will tell you everything you need to know around the country in just a little bit. But DRS, here are the odds to win a national championship at this moment. Texas routs Oklahoma, the number 1 team in the country, the best price at 4-1. What a weekend ahead. It's Texas, it's Georgia. Ohio State still a slightly better price than that of Oregon. Everything else from Week 7 in CFB next.
We're at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number 1 overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number 1 overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was
Lincoln!
But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I think the Washington Commanders are one of the best bets to win it all, or at the very least win the NFC.
Their offensive line, I do want to say one thing. It's very average. The coaching is good. They're getting good coaching from Bobby Johnson, their line coach, here from the Giants. But they've kind of overachieved. Let's call it like it is. Daniels has taken them up. Look, that division's not very good, and they could very well win it over the Eagles and the Cowboys. They're not a Super Bowl team.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
I mean, what a Saturday that we had in college football. As we shared 3 ranked versus ranked matchups, but even beyond that, it was sensational. DRS, one game that was almost ranked versus ranked, Penn State and USC. The 4th-ranked Nittany Lions on the road in L.A. against the Trojans. The next 3 games we will talk about quickly here, all of them going to overtime. Penn State wins 33-30 in OT against USC on the road in Los Angeles. Tyler Warren, the tight end that does it all for Penn State, threw the football once, a completion for 9 yards, had a rushing attempt for 4 yards, had 17 grabs, the most ever for a tight end in a single game in FBS history, for 224 yards, and a sensational trick play where he snapped the football on a double pass and then caught it, mossing a USC defender in the end zone. Penn State wins in L.A. to stay unbeaten and start 6-0 for a second consecutive year, 33-30. Southern Cal does cover slightly as a 3.5-point underdog.
Amazing victory for Penn State, beating a 3-3 football team here, acting like they won the national championship. And boy, it was set up to be a great Monday. If Penn State would have lost that game, and all I would have been talking about was how unfair it is to Penn State that their 20-foot long runway that should be 40 feet, and there's no way they can win Big Ten games because their runway's too short. Those jokes would have wrote themselves, but Penn State did come away with a victory, and that's all that matters. But when they actually play competition, they won't win those games. Who we kidding?
Well, it was good for James Franklin that USC was ousted from the AP poll, so we didn't have to bring up his ranked record for Lincoln Riley at USC, though. Now 4-9 against ranked foes, 1-3 in Big Ten play. SEC overtime as well in multiple spots in prime time on Saturday. LSU and Ole Miss, top 15 showdown under the lights for a night game in Death Valley. This is what you could hope for in overtime after Ole Miss buries a 54-yard field goal. It was not a sensational game for Garrett Nussmeier, the quarterback for the Tigers, but when it mattered, a touchdown pass to Kyron Lacey to walk it off for the Bayou Bengals, 29-26. LSU stays perfect in night games at home inside Tiger Stadium under Brian Kelly. Now 12-0, they went outright as a 3.5-point underdog against the Runnin' Rebs.
We had our first playoff football game in October because Ole Miss, now you ever watch Survivor where they sort of turn your flame out there? Ole Miss's flame, goodbye. You are no longer eligible to win the college football playoff this year. Big time win for LSU. Hanging around down in that football game. Always tough to win down at LSU at night. They pull ahead here. Great SEC game. But Ole Miss, thanks for playing this season. We'll see you next year, maybe with a different head coach.
We shall see, and let's not bring up Lane Kiffin's future just yet. Still a 2-loss Ole Miss team has an opportunity. The schedule not overly difficult. They do have Georgia, though, on the horizon in a few weeks, so maybe it is, in fact, difficult. Tennessee looking to bounce back from a road loss in Fayetteville to Arkansas as more than a 2-touchdown home favorite on Rocky Top against Florida. It also goes to overtime. But at the end of the day, the rushing game and Dylan Sampson, too much. 112 yards. His 3rd rushing score walks it off for Tennessee in Knoxville. 23-17 over Florida. Again, the Gators do cover, though, as a 16.5-point road underdog.
What happened to Tennessee's offense? 69, 51, 71, drops down to 25, 14, and 23. Stop the madness, Tennessee. Which team are you? Do you want to win the SEC or you're just trying to hang around because you got Alabama on deck? You still got to play Georgia. Tough scene on Rocky Top. Tough scene's coming.
3rd Saturday in October on Rocky Top. Alabama, 2.5-point favorite against Tennessee. Number 7, Alabama. Number 11, Tennessee, falling in the rankings in a significant Saturday in the SEC. It's Georgia. It's Texas in Austin Saturday night. 1 versus 5, the Longhorns, 3.5-point home favorite. DRS elsewhere around college football. Texas remains atop the country. They rout Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, 34-3. Just not a ton of offense for OU this year.
Texas, one of the teams that actually could have Alex Orji as their quarterback and probably still be number 1 at this point. By the way, Quinn Ewers, 190 yards and a touchdown. I'm telling you right now, make the move down there in Austin. Big arch for this game this weekend. I mean, you want to win Heisman's, you want to win national championships, make the move right now. I've seen enough. It's big arches time down there. And I don't mean McDonald's.
That's good. Texas pretty good, though, defensively. The other scores from Saturday. Georgia wins not all that comfortably as more than a 5-touchdown favorite. Notre Dame hammers Stanford at home. Iowa State unbeaten 6-0 for the first time since 1938. K-State comes back to beat Colorado in Boulder. How about Illinois and Purdue in overtime? And BYU remains undefeated as well. Now to Major League Baseball. Next.
We're at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number one overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number one overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking, but he had that program was already going there.
Only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Jennings Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day, Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I think the Washington Commanders are one of the best bets to win it all, or at the very least win the NFC.
Their offensive line, I do want to say one thing. It's very average. The coaching is good. They're getting good coaching from Bobby Johnson, their line coach. Here from the Giants, but they've kind of overachieved. Let's call it like it is. Daniels has taken them up. Look, that division's not very good, and they could very well win it over the Eagles, and the Cowboys. They're not a Super Bowl team.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
You almost forget just how many things happened this weekend in sports as we recap everything on this Monday live right here on the Early Line. Game number 1 of the National League Championship Series starting last night in Los Angeles between the Dodgers and the Mets. LA, of course, victorious in the winner-take-all Game 5 on Friday night against San Diego, blanking the Padres in 2 consecutive games. DRS, there was never a question about the Dodgers offensively or the all-star lineup at the dish. The question for LA to reach the ultimate goal as a World Series champ, how would the pitching perform in October? Well, here as of late, it has been lights out. It has been legitimately shut out. The Dodgers blanked the Mets in game number 1 of the LCS. 9-0, the victory at the Ravine yesterday. The Dodgers were a minus 162 home money line favorite. Total of 8 does go over because of a bases clearing double from Mookie Betts later in the game to cap off a wonderful night in LA for the Dodgers. The Mets only able to record 3 base knocks, make it 33 consecutive innings, DRS, for Los Angeles without allowing a single run. That is the most we have seen in MLB postseason history, matching a record from the 1967 Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah, when you're going good here. The Dodgers, the issue was never that lineup. They posted 9 runs. It was questioning what you're going to get out of your starting pitchers and your bullpen. They've been nothing short of phenomenal. But here's what I like about the Dodgers. Advanced scouting, absolutely spectacular, and a lineup that can execute. Kodai Senga pitched against the Philadelphia Phillies. First at bat, launch missile 440 feet into the seats here.
Yeah.
You probably could have had him and say, you know what, he's going to be rattled. But Phillies, unlike the Dodgers, swing at everything, which includes not even ever throwing a strike to them. So what did the Dodgers do against Kodai Senga? You know what? We've watched him not be able to throw strikes. Let's just be patient here. An inning and 2/3, 4 walks, 3 earned runs. That game was over immediately because they understood the task at hand. Yeah. Swing at strikes, don't swing at balls, take the free bases, come up with clutch base hits, and they did that all night long. 5 of 11 with runners in scoring position. The Dodgers were. You take a look at the Mets. Only 5 runners left on base, and only 3 of those even got batting attempts here with a runner in scoring position. A phenomenal effort from the Dodgers, which is supposed to happen here. The Mets played great baseball down the stretch, played a couple dead baseball teams. Now they're showing up against the Dodgers, and they're struggling. The key is going to be now, though, how long does this shutout streak go? Because the one thing we do know is the pressure starts to – it's a 7-game series, so you get a little more leeway than the 3 and the 5 games. But the New York Mets didn't score a run. Once we get into the 3rd inning and the 4th inning and the 5th inning, they don't score. Now you start pressing, and it starts getting even harder. You need a big performance out of the Mets in game number 2 just to make sure you score a run over the first 3 innings so that streak just doesn't bury you.
33 consecutive innings for Los Angeles without allowing a single run. That dates back to the early goings of game number 3 against San Diego. The Padres did win. It was a high-scoring game, 6-5, but all of the offense on both sides in the first 3 frames. So from that point, into game 4 where they blanked San Diego, into game 5 where they blanked San Diego, and into game 1 of the LCS where they blanked the New York Mets. 33 straight innings without a run. A scoreless inning streak that ties a Major League Baseball postseason record. The 1966, I said 67 to start the 1966 Baltimore Orioles. And Jack Flaherty got the start yesterday, DRS, for LA. He also started game number 2 against the Padres that San Diego won 10-2 in the LDS, where he went 5 1/3, 4 earned runs, allowing 2 homers. So much better last night. 7 innings of shutout baseball, just 2 base knocks. Meanwhile, for Kodai Senga, last night was his 3rd game, his 3rd appearance in 2024. He has been often injured this year. In the opening game against the Phillies, he was really the opener. 2 innings of work, did allow the Schwarber, but that was really it. Only 31 total pitches. Donnie, to your point, discipline at the dish, crucial for the Dodgers last night. 30 pitches out of Kodai Senga, only 10 of them in the strike zone. So when LA had runners on, they did take advantage. Shohei Ohtani, 2 for 4, scored 2 runs, an RBI. Mookie Betts, 3 ribbies. Freddie Freeman delivering an RBI as well. Max Muncy got the scoring started in the home half of the first with a couple of ribbies in that game. So the Dodgers dominant in game 1. They win 9-zip. LA expected now to run to a National League pennant. They were minus 180 to win the LCS entering game 1, now greater than $3 at minus 320. The Dodgers to win this series, in the series spread by a game and a half, that would be 6 games or earlier, 4-2 or better for Los Angeles, has a decent amount of juice at minus 166. Donnie, how deep into the LCS will this series go?
I think deep, it's not going to be a sweep. That's not going to happen here because you just don't have dominant enough starting pitching. It's funny to say that because the bullpen has been equally as dominant for the Dodgers. But you say today, like, okay, who's the starter on the mound for the Dodgers? There really isn't one. It's a bullpen game for the Dodgers, whose bullpen has been sensational. But that's not really the path to victory for shutting baseball teams down on a night-to-night basis. You're seeing an anomaly right now with the Dodgers and what they're getting away with. And, hey, just keep riding that hot hand. I do think this probably ends up going 6 games, to be honest, even though I don't think the Mets are as good. But 4-2 is still a very easy victory moving on to the World Series for the Dodgers. We don't have 1-2 games, 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the Dodgers lined up superstar stud starting pitchers with a lockdown bullpen. You're basically going starter, bullpen, starter, bullpen. You see where I'm going with this? So sooner or later, the Mets are going to have to wake up. The Mets will have home games where their crowd will be able to get involved. The Manaea has been pretty good here in the postseason and over the past 60 days. They should have an honest effort tonight. That was just a real wake-up call yesterday, 9-0, a complete shellacking here. There's only one way to go up for the Mets. You got to score some runs early to give your team some hope, because if that Dodgers bullpen continues to gain that momentum and tries to run this streak up to 40-plus innings, this series might only be going 4 games.
And, Donnie, it's an early start today out in Los Angeles. Day baseball, 1:09 p.m. Pacific time start, just after 4 p.m. here on the East Coast. The Dodgers yet to name a starter or an opener, perhaps, minus 142 on the money line. Sean Manaea gets the start for the Mets. He's been pretty good here in the postseason. Total is 8.5. Now, our producer extraordinaire, Joe Frizo, pointing this out, and oftentimes the RS in the series numbers, I don't think a lot of them make sense when they put them all together. But let's just talk about this. For the Dodgers as a series spread favorite to win by 1.5 games, again, that's 6 games or earlier. Dodgers' dominance in the LCS is minus 166. But the over of 5.5 games is minus 160. So if the odds follow, that would be the Dodgers in 6. But that's it. The Dodgers to win in 6 and the series correct score is plus 320. Something not exactly stacking up in terms of those odds for the series overall. Just wanted to make that point. NLCS MVP odds, Shohei Ohtani, the short favorite at plus 165. Wasn't great in the division series against San Diego. Did come through in game number 5, but plus 165 after a 2-for-4 night where he scored twice and had an RBI as well.
Yeah, we'll see if it's the whole, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown argument where it's like, hey, Betts wins the NLCS and Betts wins the MVP in the World Series, but maybe your best player overall is Shohei Ohtani. It's an embarrassment of riches for that roster to basically have the 2 best players in the National League batting 1 and 2 on your team. You're supposed to do damage. Those 2 guys in game number 1, they did their damage, and rightfully so, sitting up there by far the tops of the odds market here at the FanDuel Sportsbook for the MVP.
Again, the Dodgers a hefty favorite to win the National League pennant and advance to the World Series for the 4th time in the last 12 seasons, where LA has reached the playoffs all 12 years. We'll see about the pitching matchup today. Of course, we will preview Game 2 at the Ravine a little bit later on. The Dodgers a home favorite, as you might expect, but Sean Manaea trying to get the Mets to even up this series before we return to Queens. What a Monday in the Tri-State to the ALCS inside Yankee Stadium. Next.
We're at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number 1 overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number 1 overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking, but he had that program was already going there.
Only on SportsGrid.
If you're sliding DiVincenzo to the 1, obviously Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I think the Washington Commanders are one of the best bets to win it all, or at the very least win the NFC.
Their offensive line, I do want to say one thing. It's very average. The coaching is good. They're getting good coaching from Bobby Johnson, their line coach. Here from the Giants, but they've kind of overachieved. Let's call it like it is. The Angels has taken them up. Look, that division's not very good, and they could very well win it over the Eagles, and the Cowboys. They're not a Super Bowl team.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
What a Monday in New York for both baseball teams and a NFL team that plays in New Jersey, but with New York on the lid. That's the Jets. DRS from the NLCS to the American League Championship Series. The Yankees trying to get back to the World Series for the first time in 15 years since 2009. The Yanks will play host in the LCS with home field advantage in the Bronx against the Cleveland Guardians. The two division winners, the top two seeds in the AL, face off for the pennant in a spot in the Fall Classic. The Yankees, of course, a hefty favorite to get things done, greater than a $2 favorite to win a pennant, something that has eluded the Pinstripes since 2009.
Shouldn't elude them too much longer here. They are the stronger team over the Guardians and should win this series. But we understand that you have an ace on that staff here for the New York Yankees. That's won Cy Young Awards. His name is Garrett Cole. But he can't pitch all 7 games if you need it here, Ben. You're going to need other performers to step up, which includes Carlos Rodon and his stellar 0-1 record in the playoffs and a 9.82 ERA to try to jumpstart you in game number 1. Here's the issue if you're the Guardians. You got Alex Cobb on the mound. It's not as if you have a bona fide ace that's going to be able to say, we're actually going to take advantage of this game. But there are some ways that you can beat the Yankees, but I just don't think it's going to come from a Guardians perspective, the same way I didn't think it was going to come from the Kansas City Royals. This should be a clean run for the Yankees to win this pennant and get to the World Series. Even though they are the decided favorite, minus 205 price to win the series, I do think that price is valid and it is solid, and I'm not looking at the underdog Guardians to take down the Yanks. But tonight, you might see a little bit more fireworks than maybe you would see, because you usually don't throw a kitchen sink bullpen game in game number 1. Rodon has a tendency to get hit. There's some right-handed batters in that lineup for the Guardians that could be able to do damage at Yankee Stadium. But a series long, it's going to be the Yanks for me.
Minus 162, still a heavy favorite tonight inside Yankee Stadium for Rodon and the Yanks to win game number 1. DRS, we did the Fade the Public poll on Friday, asking the public who would win the decisive winner-take-all Game 5s in both the NLDS between San Diego and L.A., and between Cleveland and Detroit. The Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS for Cleveland to earn this spot in the LCS. The Guardians trying to make history for the Central Divisions. No team from either the NL or AL Central has reached the World Series since 2016, where I'm pretty sure, but let me just double check here, that team in 2016 to get to the World Series was, of course, in fact, the Guardians, as they lost to the Cubs, in that incredibly historic and significant Game 7. So a lot at stake here in this series. DRS, let's talk big picture, right? Because with a favorable path, and this is that for the Yankees, a lot of pressure is riding on New York and its captain and its superstar in Aaron Judge, who was okay in Game 4 in that matchup in the LDS against the Royals, but has not been great here in October. And despite all of that, he is the favorite to win the ALCS MVP award at plus 320, but just a $0.50 in front of Juan Soto.
Yeah, no, it makes some sense here because you're expecting him hopefully to wake up, but he really hasn't had a great postseason run in his career, but maybe this is the series because you're not going up against elite frontline starting pitching for the Cleveland Guardians, and maybe there's a chance that you can start to do some damage. But it does start in game number 1, and you're right, in that closeout game, finally getting a base knock here. All right, let's start to see those doubles and those home runs and those RBIs start to come through. But it's right, a heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best 2 ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge. And I do agree that he should be up top because the chances for the 2-run and a 3-run home run probably coming for Aaron Judge. Because why? Juan Soto is setting the table by drawing walks and just getting on base.
Yeah, and we'll see exactly how that plays out. The Yankees incredibly disciplined at the dish against the Royals, who offered up a ton of free passes in the American League Division Series. Jose Ramirez, shortest price for anybody playing for the Guardians at plus 550. Third best number to win ALCS MVP. Really the offensive bright spot, though, DRS, against Kansas City was Giancarlo Stanton. So overall, as we go back to these series numbers, unlike what we showed you the updated odds after the opening game in the NLCS, the Guardians are getting a game and a half in the series spread. That would mean 7 games for Cleveland if they were going to lose and those odds were correct, or Cleveland just winning the series outright. 5.5 games in the series. Total games market for that over-under has heavy juice on the over at minus 175. That's where it stands entering the ALCS. Again, at stake for the Guardians, a first berth in the World Series since falling in 7 games against the Cubs in the end of the curse of the Billy Goat for Chicago. That was nearly a decade ago. It's been a decade and a half for the New York Yankees since a pennant and a return to the World Series. 2009, the last year the Yankees won a World Series championship, the last time the Pinstripes were even in the World Series. Donnie, anything short of that, regardless of how long it takes in the LCS against Cleveland, will be considered a massive disappointment. And all of that pressure mounts starting tonight in the Bronx with Carlos Rodon on the bump.
If you are a Yankee fan, this is your dream season because 2 things are going to happen. Both of them will be in your favor. The Yankees beat the Guardians as anticipated, move on to the World Series. You got your wish, playing for a championship. The Yankees lose the LCS to the Guardians. Your general manager's gone. Your manager is gone in the dugout, and massive changes will be made to that lineup. Yankee fans, you can't lose even if you do lose in this round here. I would love to be in that scenario as a Philadelphia fan.
I like your perspective always, DRS, that if things are an utter disaster and failure, yes, it will sting and it will hurt, but maybe that Band-Aid will be placed on your hearts because Aaron Boone would be fired and there would be a sweeping change to your organization. I still think the Yankees would prefer an American League pennant with a victory here in this series starting tonight in the Bronx against the Guardians. Again, we will preview both Game 2 for the Mets and the Dodgers. Game 1 for the Yankees and the Guardians later. Now it's Monday night at MetLife. Next.
We're at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number 1 overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number 1 overall pick. I think you got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
It's a new era in CFB to start off this year, put on full display.
My take on this game is simple. I know some people will be upset about it. Good riddance to the Pac-12.
Can you do it in terms of a week to week to week?
I don't see a pathway for this team to miss the college football playoffs.
We want to make sure you have those best bets in the entirety of our betting cards. That was thinking! But he had that program was already going there!
Only on SportsGrid.
I do a sliding DiVincenzo to the what? Obviously, Terrence Jennings Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively. and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I think the Washington Commanders are one of the best bets to win it all, or at the very least win the NFC.
Their offensive line, I do want to say one thing. It's very average. The coaching is good. They're getting good coaching from Bobby Johnson, their line coach. Here from the Giants, but they've kind of overachieved. Let's call it like it is. Daniels has taken them up. Look, that division's not very good, and they could very well win it over the Eagles, and the Cowboys. They're not a Super Bowl team.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Now, I don't think it's hyperbole, but it's going to sound rather grandiose when I say that this might be the most significant and monumental Monday night matchup to end out a Week 6 slate in the history of the NFL, or at least in recent memory, because of all of the stakes, everything on the line tonight, and everything that has happened in the last 5 or 6 days for the New York Jets, with all of the drama, either on or off the field, that has followed New York since Aaron Rodgers back in March of a year ago made his intentions clear that he wanted to play as the quarterback for the New York Jets. Here it is, DRS, Week 6, the conclusion of this week in the NFL on a Monday night at MetLife. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, a slight 1.5-point underdog, although that line is working in favor of Gang Green hosting the Buffalo Bills. Total 40.5. Donnie, our reactions, of course, after Robert Saleh was fired last week by New York on Tuesday morning have varied. Whose fault is it? Who calls the shots for this Jets organization? Was it owner Woody Johnson? Was it GM Joe Douglas? Or is it the de facto general manager in Aaron Rodgers? Jeff Ulbrich named interim head coach of this Jets team. Nathaniel Hackett demoted. Todd Downing, the new offensive play caller for the Jets. Regardless of how you feel about this situation, I think one thing holds serve tonight. All of the onus is on number 8, the starting quarterback for the Jets. Of course, his name is Aaron Rodgers. How do you see it playing out on this Monday night in MetLife?
I'm backing the Jets tonight. I am. And I don't really like the way Aaron Rodgers has played, but sometimes there are points in seasons where you have to make that stand. And Aaron Rodgers knows he's a good football player. Hasn't played good football this season, and that's saying a lot at this point. But the fact that you're getting rid of Robert Saleh as your head coach, and now you're moving forward and saying, we have to be better as a football team, and it's on my shoulders. But also keep in mind, styles make fights as well. I think the Jets defense better than the Buffalo Bills. James Cook coming in this game, an electric weapon, banged up, questionable for this one. Khalil Shakir, we'll see if he gives it a run. So a lot of players that you like to lean on for the Buffalo Bills, questionable to say the least. Not really the case here if we're lining up with the Jets. And also keep in mind, the reason I love the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday to get that win, I thought they should have won by double digits. They played well enough to do that because how bad the Browns were, but the Browns were coming in, Ben, on 3 straight road games here. Look at what's happening tonight with the Buffalo Bills, at the Ravens, at the Texans, at the Jets. It's so hard when the NFL lines you up with those 3 straight road games just to try to make it through. And there were no layups. And they're like, oh, at this team we can easily beat. The Ravens are really good. The Texans are really good. We expected the Jets probably to be really good, but the results just haven't been there. But if I'm looking man-to-man, matchup for matchup, home field advantage, and getting points, I'm taking the Jets tonight.
And part of the reason, Donnie, that all of the impetus and pressure rides on a game in Week 6 is because of the talent the New York Jets have and because of the preseason expectation that Aaron Rodgers would be the quarterback to, at the very least, lead the Jets to the postseason for the first time in 14 years, snapping a 13-season playoff drought, by far the longest in the National Football League. So with that expectation comes the great pressure of tonight, because if it's not Robert Saleh, it's all on Aaron Rodgers. The New York Jets got off to a 2-1 start. They have dropped 2 games in a row. The Buffalo Bills won 3 straight to start the year. They have also dropped 2 games in a row. And, of course, DRS, we talk totals now. 40.5 is the number. It seems limited for this matchup. If the Jets win what feels like a must-win game tonight, how much offense do we see at MetLife?
That's a trick question, right? You have one quarterback on one side that's fantastic in Josh Allen. Aaron Rodgers, when he plays to his capabilities, can be a great quarterback. You look at that and say, how is it only 4.5? Why? Because it's a division game, and so much is at stake for both of these teams. You're looking at the Jets needing this victory just to get back to 500. You're looking at the Buffalo Bills. If they lose this game, they will be 500. You need both of these teams to protect the football in each side. But I think the key indicator is going to be, I understand like Aaron Rodgers, new offensive coordinator coming in, feed Aaron Rodgers, but really that ground game has to get cranked up for the New York Jets against a Buffalo Bills team can run on, and I think it will. So the contrarian play, the easy one, like, hey, that over 4, what are you kidding me? 21-20 gets the cash in this game with these two offenses. Don't get tricked into that one here. I think the game play for the Jets is play great defense like they've been playing, and really get Breece Hall cranked up along with Braylon Allen. Not to say to keep Buffalo off the field, but just give that balance to help Aaron Rodgers on offense. I think we're looking at a game in the high 30s tonight.
64 rushing yards or less for New York in each of their last 2 losses. We will compare the quarterbacks and the props for Monday night after we hear from you to start hour number 3 next on the Early Line.